Welcome to today's deep dive. So to start us off, I want you to just picture yourself suspended about 26 meters underwater in the Gulf of Thailand.
Oh, wow. Okay. Setting the scene early.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So you're down there, right? The water around you is cold. It is incredibly dark. The visibility is just terrible. And as your eyes finally, adjust to the murky gloom, you realize you're hovering over what looks like an underwater crime scene.
Right. It's not a pretty picture.
No, it's not. Below you is a shipwreck.
Yeah.
But it hasn't just sunk to the bottom and rested there peacefully. It has been completely blasted apart. You're looking at this massive debris field of shattered 15th century pottery and splintered wooden planks, violently torn open by essentially dynamite-wielding treasure hunters.
It really is just a devastating image to conjure because, for a long time, that shattered debris field was basically the standard way submerged history was treated all across the globe.
Right.
It was viewed as this resource to be aggressively plundered rather than, a complex story that we needed to understand.
Totally. And today we are exploring this specific moment that all changed. We're zeroing in on a massive paradigm-shifting turning point in history, which is the excavation and survey of the Pattaya wreck site in 1982.
Yeah, a hugely important moment.
We're drawing on these really detailed field reports from the Thai Fine Arts Department and the Western Australian Maritime Museum to uncover how this looted, seemingly ruined 15th century shipwreck completely revolutionized our understanding of Southeast Asian shipbuilding.
It birthed an entirely new era of scientific underwater archaeology in the region, really.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah.
Because to understand why the 1982 excavation was such a monumental shift, I think we first have to look at the absolute chaos that defined the decades prior. Right?
Oh, absolutely. The Gulf of Thailand prior to 1982 was essentially the Wild West of the maritime world.
The Wild West.
Yeah, this was not an era of careful, methodical science. It was an era of aggressive, exploratory salvage. Ancient shipwrecks were being discovered at a really alarming rate, honestly.
By who? Like archaeologists?
No, mostly by commercial fishing trawlers and transport vessels just going about their normal marine activities. And, once a site was found by locals, the commercial treasure hunters descended almost immediately.
Yeah, and reading the sources describing these operations, they were incredibly destructive. They weren't using soft brushes to dust away the sand.
No, definitely not.
These looters were using explosives. They were literally blowing their way through heavy timber decks and bulkheads of ancient cargo compartments just to get at the valuable 15th century ceramics inside.
Right.
They were functioning like grave robbers equipped with scuba gear and TNT.
That's a really accurate way to put it. They were after the pristine, unbroken trade goods. We were talking about things like Sukhothai and Si Satchanalai ceramics.
Which were super valuable, right?
Exceptionally high prices on the international antiquities market. Collectors wanted perfect bowls and plates, not fragments. But the real catalyst that forced the Thai government to finally take action against all this destruction actually happened a few years earlier, in 1974.
Oh, right, the Tukram wreck.
Exactly, also known as the Sata Hip wreck. Local fishermen discovered it, and that particular ship was absolutely loaded with those highly sought-after ceramics. It served as this massive wake-up call for the authorities.
Because they realized how much they were losing.
Yeah, it made them realize that their seabed was this sprawling, undocumented museum, and it was being actively robbed blind on an industrial scale.
Okay, wait, I'm stuck on something here, though. That realization led to the first joint Thai-Danish maritime projects in the mid-'70s.
Mm-hmm.
But by the time we get to this famous 1982 expedition at the Pattaya site, the sources note the treasure hunters had already been there.
Right. They had.
They had already blown the site apart and looted all the valuable intact ceramics. So if the looters had already stripped the site of its treasure, why did the archaeologists even bother? Why dedicate weeks of back-breaking labor to diving in the mud if the prize was already gone?
Well, that assumption that the pottery is the only valuable thing on a shipwreck, that is the exact mindset the 1982 expedition systematically dismantled.
Oh, interesting.
The focus of maritime archaeology underwent this massive philosophical shift right here. Researchers stopped looking just at the cargo, and they started looking at the vessel itself.
The ship wasn't just the box it came in.
Exactly. The ship wasn't merely a floating container for shiny objects. The ship was a marvel of ancient technology. The shattered, waterlogged remains of the Pattaya hull held engineering secrets that, honestly, no intact ceramic bowl could ever communicate to us.
Okay, so let's go down to the site in January 1982 and see how they actually uncovered those secrets. This is a joint mission, right, between the Thai Fine Arts Department, led by Vidya Intakosi, and the Western Australian Maritime Museum, featuring Jeremy Green.
Yep, that's the team.
So they head out to the Pattaya wreck, which is located midway between Kalan and Lari-Mataya. And reading through the field reports, the working conditions down there sound absolutely miserable.
Oh, they were incredibly tough. The environment of the Gulf of Thailand heavily dictates how and when any underwater work can even happen. I mean, they were operating at a depth of 26 meters, sitting on a seabed composed of this dense mix of silt and broken shell.
And the water is moving constantly, right?
Yeah, you have a tidal range of about 2 meters, which creates significant water movement. The current on the surface was running at about 1 knot, though it was slightly calmer down on the seabed. But the visibility was the real wild card.
Like, how bad was it?
Well, on a good day, the divers could see maybe 10 meters. On a bad day, the suspended silt created this murky haze where they could only see 3 meters in front of their face masks.
Wow. And everywhere they looked through that haze, there was evidence of the looters. Like, the field reports mentioned these large, semi-complete storage jars scattered randomly all around the perimeter of the site.
Yeah, just toss aside.
Right. They had clearly been deliberately moved by the treasure hunters, just shoved out of the way to get access to the deeper layers of the ship's hold. But the archaeologists didn't just swim around picking up the leftover pieces, did they?
No, not at all. They brought a totally different methodology to this devastated site. Because, I mean, how do you even begin to map a blown-up shipwreck in the dark?
Right. Where do you start?
You start by imposing rigorous geometry on the chaos. So sections of the wooden hull were protruding slightly from the silt. So the very first thing the dive team did was set up a 20-meter-long baseline right down the central long axis of the wreck.
A baseline. So what exactly is that in an underwater context?
It's essentially a taut, highly visible measuring tape staked securely into the seabed. It acts as a permanent reference point. By using this line, every single timber, nail, or pottery sherd they uncover can be triangulated and plotted on a map with an accuracy of about plus or minus 100 millimeters.
That is wild to do in 3 meters of visibility.
Right. And they decided to start at the southern end of that line and work northwards systematically, just excavating square by square.
And to actually clear the site, they used these devices called airlifts to remove the overburden, which is, the layer of sand and silt covering the wreck.
Yeah, airlifts are fascinating tools.
Right, because an airlift isn't just an underwater vacuum cleaner. It's this long vertical pipe where compressed air is injected at the bottom, and as the air bubbles rise and expand up the pipe, they create this powerful suction that pulls water, sand, and mud up and away from the delicate timbers.
Exactly. It's a very controlled way to remove the seabed.
But the crazy part is, the looters had actually already airlifted down to a depth of about 750 millimeters in some places. And mixed in with the ancient 15th century silt, the archaeologists found modern garbage.
Yeah.
Plastic rope, electric flash cubes from underwater cameras. The looters just left their trash behind.
It perfectly highlights the blatant disregard the treasure hunters had for the site's historical integrity. And, because of that intense prior looting, when the 1982 team finished clearing the main excavation area, the artifact haul was incredibly sparse.
Like almost nothing.
The field logs show they found some sherds of earthenware, coarse stoneware, a bit of celadon, exactly 1 fragment of porcelain, and a number of conical-shaped lead ingots. To a commercial salvage operation, that list represents a total financial failure.
Right. But for the archaeologists, the real treasure emerged when that airlift cleared the final layers of mud. They uncovered a section of the surviving hull. So what exactly did they find under all that modern trash?
Well, they exposed an overall section of hull measuring roughly 20 meters by 4 meters. But the heavily studied, well-preserved section was about 9 by 4 meters. And the architectural data they extracted from those waterlogged timbers completely changed our understanding of maritime history.
Because of how it was built.
Yes, the hull construction was incredibly robust. They discovered a triple-planked hull. The inner layer of planking alone was 70 millimeters thick.
Wow.
And it wasn't just nailed together with iron that would rust away. The planks were edge-joined using wooden dowels.
Oh, because when a wooden dowel gets wet,
it swells up inside the hole, creating an incredibly tight, flexible, and waterproof seal. And on top of that thick inner layer, the builders added 2 outer layers of planking, each 40 millimeters thick.
Okay, hold on, because you mentioned a few specific structural terms in the notes. Things like a strake with a trapezoidal cross-section and a garboard with a hollow dead rise. I mean, What exactly is a garboard and a hollow dead rise, and why do they matter?
Good question. So a strake is simply a continuous line of planking running from the front of the ship to the back.
Okay, got it.
The garboard is the very first strake, the most important line of planks attached directly to the ship's keel, which is the backbone of the vessel. Now, dead rise refers to the upward angle of the hull as it moves away from the keel.
Right, the slope of the bottom.
Exactly. So a hollow dead rise means that instead of angling up in a straight line, the shape is slightly concave, curving inward. This is a highly sophisticated hydrodynamic design. It allows the ship to track much straighter through water and resist being blown sideways by strong transoceanic winds.
So all of these complex geometric designs and triple-layered swelling dowels basically mean this ship was custom-built to handle the severe stresses of deep-water voyages.
Without a doubt.
But there was another massive structural revelation from the 1982 dig. As they followed the structure forward from where the main mast sat, they uncovered 6 transverse bulkheads. For someone who isn't a naval architect, can you explain the mechanics of a bulkhead?
Absolutely. A transverse bulkhead is a sturdy internal wooden wall that runs across the entire width of the ship, fundamentally dividing the inside of the hull into separate sealed-off compartments.
Okay.
This serves 2 critical functions. First, it provides immense structural rigidity to the entire vessel, keeping the hull from flexing and twisting too much in heavy, violent seas. Second, and most importantly, it creates watertight zones.
Oh, so it functions basically like a giant wooden ice cube tray.
Yes, that is a perfect way to visualize it. If the ship hits a submerged reef and tears a hole in the hull, only that one specific ice cube compartment floods.
The water can't get to the other cubes.
Exactly. The rigid walls prevent the water from flowing into the rest of the ship. The vessel remains buoyant, preventing a single localized leak from dragging the entire ship down to the bottom.
That's brilliant. And I think there has been a lingering kind of unspoken assumption in a lot of historical texts that this level of watertight damage control engineering was strictly a modern invention, or perhaps something introduced to Southeast Asia much later by Western colonial powers.
Oh, absolutely. That bias was definitely there.
But this discovery completely shatters that timeline, doesn't it?
It does. The 1982 survey provided the very first empirical, physical data proving that Southeast Asian shipbuilders were conceptualizing and implementing highly sophisticated maritime engineering centuries before widespread European contact in the region.
That's amazing.
The Pattaya site was the first place in Southeast Asia where the internal construction of a vessel of this era was rigorously documented, measured, and published. It proved these ancient shipbuilders were masters of applied physics. I mean, the bulkheads themselves even had large, limber holes, essentially drainage valves, cut into their base, allowing the crew to control water flow and pump out the bilges efficiently.
Man, and it wasn't just the sophisticated woodworking either. There was this incredible detail in the reports regarding the waterproofing.
Oh, the luting.
Yes. To seal the joints between those bulkheads and the wooden frames, the ancient builders used a specific luting material. Luting is basically a hard, resinous putty packed into the seams. And when the Australian and Thai archaeologists brought samples of this 15th century putty to the surface, they realized something extraordinary.
It's one of my favorite details from the dig.
It smelled, felt, and behaved almost exactly like a material called cham, which is a mixture of resins and oils that modern Thai fishermen still mix up today to seal their own wooden boats.
Right, and that finding bridges a 500-year gap in a single moment. It represents a living, unbroken tradition. You have a direct, tactile link stretching from a 15th century shipyard straight through to the modern fishing fleets operating in the Gulf of Thailand today.
The recipe just survived.
Yeah, the chemical recipe for that sealant didn't vanish into history. It was useful, so it was passed down hand to hand from one generation of boat builders to the next.
That is so cool. Okay, so right as the team is wrapping up this meticulous, groundbreaking documentation of the Pattaya hull, the narrative takes a completely unexpected turn. The 1982 expedition decides to go on a surprise detour.
Yeah, this is where things get really wild. Towards the very end of the excavation window, they receive a tip-off. A staff member from the Thai Fine Arts Department was speaking with a local fisherman who claimed he knew the location of another, totally untouched wreck site further north of Pattaya.
Another wreck.
Right. And the team decides to take a day trip to investigate the claim, though, expectations were understandably low.
So they load into this fisherman's small, flush-decked motorized boat, and he navigates them several kilometers offshore. And they are looking back at the coastline, seeing an almost featureless island. And the fisherman simply cuts the engine, points to the open water and says the wreck is right there.
It's right here.
Yeah. And the water depth at this location is 35 meters. The archaeologists are looking at their instruments with considerable skepticism because navigating by visual landmarks on a featureless island to find a pinpoint location underwater that sounds like a guaranteed wild goose chase.
It really did sound highly improbable. But they decide to send just one diver over the side to perform a quick circular search pattern. Now, at a depth of 35 meters, the pressure is significant. Your bottom time is severely restricted by the physics of nitrogen absorption in the bloodstream, to avoid decompression sickness.
So they couldn't stay long.
Not at all. The diver only had a maximum of 20 minutes down there before they had to begin a slow ascent.
20 minutes to find a needle in a haystack in deep, dark water. So what actually happens?
Well, all their skepticism vanished the moment the diver broke the surface. The diver emerged carrying a pristine, perfectly preserved set of blue and white porcelain plates and dishes.
Unbelievable.
In that single, incredibly brief dive, they brought up more intact artifacts from this newly discovered location, which they quickly designated as Wreck Site G, than they had recovered during the entire multi-week systematic excavation of the Pattaya site.
The catalog from that brief plunge is just staggering. We are talking about stacked basins found sitting perfectly in a row on the seabed, beautiful blue and white porcelain, and something else very specific. 12 flat pyramidal lead ingots.
Yes.
Now, why did the archaeologists get so animated about a dozen heavy pieces of lead?
Because those lead ingots functioned as a crucial geographical fingerprint. They were visibly flatter than the conical ingots found at the Pattaya site, and that specific pyramidal shape strongly indicated a Thai origin for the vessel.
So it told them where it came from.
Exactly. An isolated shipwreck on the ocean floor is basically a puzzle piece stripped of its context. But when you can definitively identify the origin points of the cargo, like these uniquely shaped Thai ingots, you can begin tracing the invisible lines of ancient maritime trade networks.
Right.
It tells researchers who was actively sailing, what bulk materials they were transporting, and where those materials were likely heading. It signaled that this deeply buried, newly discovered site held the potential to answer massive macroeconomic questions about historical Southeast Asia.
Okay, so all of this combined, the rigorous, millimeter-accurate mapping of the Pattaya hull and the sudden paradigm-shifting discovery of Wreck Site G, completely changed the trajectory of the field. The reports state that 1982 marked the definitive shift from intuitive archaeology to scientific archaeology in the region.
Yeah, that's the big legacy here.
What does that transition actually look like in practice, though?
Well, before 1982, underwater archaeology in this part of the world often relied heavily on educated guesswork and, frankly, art history. Divers would bring up a load of ceramics, look at the stylistic designs, the glazes, and the firing techniques, and intuitively guess the date and origin of the wreck based on the artistic trends of the era.
Sort of just eyeballing it.
Right. But the 1982 Pattaya dig proved that this approach was fundamentally inadequate. It established a new standard. You must systematically record the spatial layout of the site using grids. You must analyze the chemical composition of the artifacts and the looting. You must document the hole's architecture using offsets, levels, and precise geometric plotting.
So it's about the context.
Exactly. It cemented the idea that the physical context of how an object sits in the mud is just as important as the object itself.
And this scientific awakening had a massive institutional impact within Thailand, too. It directly led to the creation of the Thai Underwater Archaeology Division, or the TUEAT. The TMWAT is entirely unique in Southeast Asia because they adopted a strict go-it-alone policy regarding their submerged heritage.
That policy is perhaps Thailand's most enduring legacy in this specific scientific field. The Thai government chose to fully fund the TUEAT internally. They do not partner with commercial salvage companies to offset costs, and there is absolutely zero commercial sale of any recovered artifacts.
Which is huge because that's not how it usually works.
Not at all. In many other parts of the world, cash-strapped governments strike deals with treasure hunters to split the profits of a wreck, allowing half the artifacts to be sold to private collectors. But Thailand decided that their underwater cultural heritage was simply not for sale.
Wow.
The cargoes and the structural artifacts are documented, conserved, stored, and displayed entirely at the government's expense, primarily at the National Maritime Museum in Chanthaburi.
You can see that profound respect for the past in how they concluded the 1982 Pattaya dig. Like, they didn't just rip the massive timber hole out of the water to rot in the open air. At the end of the excavation, they used a water dredge to carefully pump sterile sand back over the exposed timbers, intentionally reburying the hull.
Yeah, which seems counterintuitive to some people.
But they understood the science of wood preservation, right? By burying it deep in the sand, they placed it in an anaerobic, oxygen-free environment. And without oxygen, the bacteria that consume wood cannot survive, effectively freezing the hull in time for future generations.
It is the ultimate act of scientific patience. They extracted the architectural data they needed, answered their immediate questions, and then put the artifact back to sleep until better technology comes along.
And speaking of better technology,
Oh, yeah. If we look at the modern echoes of that 1982 expedition, the technological leap that has occurred since then is astounding. I mean, in 1982, they were relying on manual tape measures, analog depth gauges, and drawing panoramic site sketches by hand on waterproof paper.
right. And today, the field reports outline a totally different operational world. The TUAID is using global positioning systems to log exact coordinates down to the centimeter. They use geographic information systems to process massive amounts of spatial data.
It's night and day.
They use advanced remote sensing technology, bouncing sonar and lasers off the seabed to create highly detailed digital elevation models that reveal anomalies a diver might swim right past in the dark. They're deploying remotely operated vehicles, or ROVs, equipped with high-definition cameras to film sites at depths humans can barely reach.
And thanks to this modern tech suite, they have now discovered, registered, and mapped 46 distinct shipwrecks across the Andaman Sea and the Gulf of Thailand.
46 wrecks.
Yeah, and those 46 documented wrecks have allowed modern researchers to classify ancient shipbuilding techniques into distinct, recognizable typologies. They can now definitively tell the difference between a shell-based construction and a frame-based construction just by looking at sonar data.
That's incredible.
This data helps historians map the exact transoceanic sailing routes that connected the Indian Ocean, Southeast Asia, and East Asia. But, none of that macro-level mapping is possible without the micro-level foundation. The meticulous tape and level work done by those freezing, exhausted divers at Pattaya in 1982 was the necessary first step that made all this high-tech analysis possible.
So what does this massive paradigm shift actually leave us with? The 1982 Pattaya expedition wasn't just about what a group of divers managed to pull out of the murky water. It was a fundamental shift in how we look at the past.
Absolutely.
By turning their attention away from the shiny, missing cargo and focusing intensely on the shattered, muddy remains of a wooden hull, they uncovered the hidden genius of ancient Southeast Asian shipbuilders. They proved with hard physical data that centuries ago, local engineers were creating highly sophisticated, bulkhead-reinforced vessels capable of dominating global trade routes.
They forced a permanent shift in the narrative, moving it from commercial treasure hunting to rigorous historical reclamation. And they built an institutional framework in Thailand that ensures the seabed is treated as a protected, fragile archive rather than, an expendable commercial mine.
Yeah, the seabed truly is nature's ultimate vault. So think back to that murky, blasted crime scene we started with at 26 meters deep. Now imagine what lies beyond it. With today's advanced ROVs and 3D laser scanners pushing deeper into the dark, crushing depths of the ocean, miles beyond what the divers of 1982 could ever hope to reach, what other invisible technological marvels from ancient cultures are sitting quietly in the cold sand, perfectly preserved, just waiting for us to shine a light on them.